Is this an ancient surgical implant, or is this a modern day fake? It's concerning Peru skulls, and it leaves mysteries. If authenticated, the skull would represent a unique discovery in the Andes. The elongated cone-shaped skull. We know the Peru elongated skulls have been making history lately. So this elongated cone-shaped skull with a possible metal implant could represent one of the earliest evidence from Peru of ancient surgical implants, or it could be a modern-day fake. The fact that the skull, which was donated to the Museum of Osteology in Oklahoma City, has a cone shape is nothing too unusual, because Peruvians during ancient times were known to bind the heads of their little children, squeezing the children's heads with bands during development to achieve the distinctive shape of a cone, elongated cone heads. But the metal implant in the skull is highly unusual, and if authenticated, would potentially be a unique find from the ancient Andean world. Also, this is a potential implant. The skull has a hole beneath the metal that was possibly created through trepanation, drilling the skull, that is. Trepanation is when a hole is inserted into a person's skull in an attempt to treat an injury or medical condition, and it was a common practice in the ancient world. The Museum of Osteology posted several pictures of the skull on its Facebook page, saying its experts are not able to verify the authenticity of the metal implant at this time. The museum representative told Live Science that no carbon dating has been done, and an archaeologist has yet to examine it up close. So is this implant authentic? Scientists talked to several scholars, reported talked to scholars not affiliated with the museum to get their take on the implant's authenticity. The overall opinion was mixed, of course, because nothing has been examined yet. You can't say anything if you haven't examined the age of the metal and how it was done. Now, some were skeptics and suggested that the implant is a forgery. Others suspect the implant could be the real deal. Again, they have to examine this thing. Either way, several scientific tests will need to be done before a final determination can be made as to whether the implant is authentic, scholar said. Of course, that is to be expected. John Verano, anthropology professor at Tulane University, Louisiana, said, "I'm quite dubious that this is anything authentic." This is what he said in an email referring to the metal implant possibly being a modern-day forgery, even if the skull is legit. He said, "In a few words, I think this is something fabricated to make the skull a more valuable collection." Verano said this metal implant could have been inserted many decades ago before either the museum or the donor owned it. And Verano examined several Andean skulls that allegedly have metal implants and published a paper on the topic in 2010 in the International Journal of Osteoarchaeology. In that paper, Verano described skulls that supposedly held metal implants, but they were either forgeries or metal was not a surgical implant at all, but instead was used as a grave offering. Well, how did it get stuck in the skull? That's the thing. Now, other scholars said that it's possible the metal implant could be real, but it's too early to say for certain until further tests have been carried out. Daniel Curran, anthropologist, professor at University of California, Santa Barbara, said, "I have never seen anything like this before. Based on the pictures, it looks like the metal piece was thinly hammered into shape." He said, based on the fracture patterns, this individual, who looks to be an older male, suffered a massive blunt force trauma to the right side of his head. The fact that the radiating and concentric fracture lines show signs of healing suggests this individual survived at least several weeks to months after this happened. Curran said, since metallurgical technology varied across the Andes and the time, tests on the metal in the skull could help to shed light on where it was made, Curran said. It would also be helpful to have the skull x-rayed and determine if the piece of metal is covering a trepanation hole or an opening cranial fracture. There are a few cases from past discoveries where after a trepanation, a piece of the person's bone or gird was placed in the hole that was cut out, Curran said. Additionally, in a 2013 American Journal of Physical Anthropology article, Curran reported on a case where a person who lived in Peru about 800 years ago wore a tight-fitting skull cap that had a metal cap stitched onto it. They wore the cap like a helmet, providing protection for the area carved out by the trepanation. Ken Johnson, anthropology professor at SUNY Cortland, also said that the metal implant could be authentic, but again, said tests, of course, need to be done. But regardless of whether or not the implant is real, the person it was placed on did survive an awful injury. So, in other words, they did have a hole and they did survive their injury. So obviously, thank goodness, at that time, they did have proper medical care, so this person survived. Now, they said it is fair to describe this individual as a survivor. There is extensive trauma to the right side of the cranium, affecting the frontal, temporal, and right parietal bones. This is what Johnson said. He noted that the person seems to have survived for a time after these injuries. He said there's evidence of healing where the edges of the fracture bones have sufficient time to grow back together. It's not clear at the moment when tests of this skull will take place. This is originally on Live Science. It's by Owen Jarris. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.